Hey, it's Matt back to defend open source podcasting through the way of a YouTube video. The irony is not lost on me. I've launched something called PodcastPower.cc. You can see it at PodcastPower.cc. I built it with AI in just a few hours, and it's a way to show you that open source podcasting is alive and well, and perhaps closed source podcasting is the one that should be in trouble. PodcastPower.cc. Let's dive into it. What I've done here is I've taken some of the really cool, marketable Podcasting 2.0 tags. These are the enhancements to RSS for podcasts that allow me to, number one, rapidly prototype an app like this, but to also showcase how these features can be used in your own environment. And what I want you to take away from this is that the open source side of podcasting isn't always just about like audio versus video or freedom versus walled gardens. It's also about being able to build experiences for audio and not have to wait for the industry or for apps or for podcast hosts to catch up. And I think that that is often overlooked. I come from the WordPress world where WordPress lives as sort of like this framework, and then there's multi-billion-dollar industries that live adjacent to it that pull parts of WordPress and build and enhance on top of it. And some of Dave's comments for the live item tag that he blogged about earlier this week or last week really sort of got those gears turning in my head that said, well, let me just like build this blueprint. It's in the WordPress world known as like a style book, where you have a WordPress theme and you can see all of the things that it can do on one page. That's kind of what I'm doing here with Podcast Power. So visit the site, podcastpower.cc, and just go through it and look at how I've pulled out some of these tags and put them into place. Like, for instance, when we're looking at the Podcasting 2.0 landing page, we can see that there's a live stream headed today in a few hours with a special guest. There are some host and guest cards here, which are the person tag coming from Podcasting 2.0. We have the randomized chapters viewer, so you can randomly click and change these chapters and explore new things and click these chapter markers to go and immediately play the podcast. This is stuff that really helps with that, kind of unique experience for podcast listening. The more chapters you use, the better it is for your listener. If your chapter art looks really cool, they'll be able to click on it and play it and more enticed to do that thing. It's kind of just thinking outside of the box instead of just like your traditional sort of podcast listening experience. Let's jump into an episode. When we view the episode pages, I'm pulling in the funding tag, the social interact tag, hosts and guests. Looks like we get a little issue here with this with the styling. We'll talk about the development side of this later on. Episode notes and transcript. And we load the transcript in. We can show the transcript. We can search for it. Really cool stuff. Chapters, so we can see all the chapters in this episode and click around to play this episode at the different chapter markers. But these are things that really enhance that listener experience, and especially transcripts. We can search for things in this transcript field. We can play it right from this point. These are things that, yes, they do exist in some podcast apps, but if you're a solo podcaster all the way up to a branded podcast from a big audio production company, take these ideas, take the framework of building a new experience outside of the traditional apps, and do it on your own website. Build your own app leveraging these tags and these RSS enhancements, and you will definitely have a better listening experience. And we don't have to wait for the industry or for one host or one app to catch up. Because it's open source, we can start building it today. And that is my intent with this. If we open up the podcast player here, I built a little sort of Apple-style way of listening to a podcast and having it go right through and follow the transcript for us. By the way, Apple did get the transcript tag from the Podcasting 2.0 movement, so fantastic stuff. And you can see that we're just looking for new ways to make our podcast listening experience better. Always adding the funding tag wherever you're listening to podcasts. Like, this is the tag that every podcast app should adopt. It's literally just the text field. But just letting folks know, hey, you want to support the show? Click here, and you can do that. One of the other really cool things I like about this site is that if we pick another podcast, you can just see how the site changes a little bit. Like we don't have any persons tag on the new media show because they're not using it, but they are using the location tag. So if I scroll down to the bottom, I put that down here, and I've mapped that location out because they use coordinates inside of their location field. And now I can map this podcast right to an open map. And if you had like a audio tour for your local city or tourism interest, you can imagine having a map with all these points plotted out, and they can click into it and listen to it. So it's really about thinking outside of the box and a little bit more creative when you come to this stuff. And you can kind of compare and contrast a lot of this experience with a podcast like Sounds Profitable, which doesn't really leverage many of the tags at all. So when we click into listening to a podcast episode from Sounds Profitable, the transcripts don't load because I don't believe they're using the transcript tag. And they have just the show notes here, and there's no chapters, there's no funding. And you can kind of see as you browse through Podcast Power, you can kind of see that the experience is different. The more stuff, the more Podcasting 2.0 these podcasts are leveraging, the more interactive and engaging these podcast episodes feel. And I think that's really important if you want to enhance that listener experience for our listeners. Every card, or almost every card, that's leveraging a Podcast 2.0 tag, I have these little helper buttons. So if you're a developer or you're working for a brand and you're like, hey, I want this stuff, every card that I'm showing here is going to explain what that Podcast 2.0 tag does, and it'll link to the documentation on how to develop this in your app. So I'm hoping Podcast Power is a nice showcase for Podcasting 2.0 tags, but also to get those gears turning in your own head about how to leverage this stuff for building a better listening experience in your brand. It's not just about, the open movement of audio versus closed walled gardens. It's not about making no money and looking at the top of the food chain, also saying, look how much money you're making there. This is about having the opportunity to develop and enhance podcasts across the board. If you have video, if you have audio, you can build your own experiences, again, instead of having to wait for one host or one app or one major platform to do it for you. PodcastPower.cc. Check it out. The podcastsetup.com is my podcast newsletter. Check that out. Thumbs up if you like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you want more of this stuff. Leave a comment below what you think about Podcast Power. How are you going to leverage these Podcasting 2.0 tags in your podcast listening experience? Are you doing it now? Let me know in the comments. All right, we'll see you in the next video.